Weardale People and Places project is about preserving and extending the knowledge about the history and the heritage of Weardale. Mainly with the exhibition that we had in Stanhope this year, it was partly to bring people in to look at some of the images that the museum had that represents Weardale in times gone by, but also to do some comparisons with people's pictures and views of how Weardale is now. So it's linking the present times with what's gone on in past decades and centuries in the Dale. So there's a continuum of understanding of how people lived and worked in the area.
I've lived in Weardale all my life. We farmed in Lawless. My brother was in the house, that's my Harry. He was waiting for the news to hear if war was going to start or not. And 11 o'clock he came into the byre and he said we were at war with Germany. And I mean, you know, we were just young. And when war started, we were swinging in the byre. And we used to use the chains that the horse used to use, and we would hang them up in the byre, and we would put a cushion on, and we would swing in the byre, and that was the day war started.
Tunstall House and Tunstall Cottage, and it hasn't changed very much. Still, there's a few little bits of features that look the same. School taxi was at the one end of the reservoir, and we lived at the other end, and so, which I am looking down there now, and to me it looks like 1.5 miles. And I actually remember picking wild strawberries in the hedge bottom where I'm looking now. Yeah.
We loved going to school. We would go to school when there was no road, there was no vehicles could run. Because there was so much snow, we would walk on the wall tops, walk clogs, wooden soles, and of course the snow would build up on the cokers. You called them cokers, they were like cleats, iron cleats on the heels and on the soles. And the snow would build up on these, and you felt as though you were walking on stilts. And then we would knock them off.
I was a good boy, really. I only got the cane twice. A great big 6 foot long cane, 2 meters long the cane was. Wow, great big thing, and it hurt. I didn't do that again.
And then when we got to school, there was a Miss Bell taught us, and Miss Bell was lovely. We used to take vegetables to school, and she would make soup for us. And we thought that was great. We loved to go to school in winter time. Oh, sledging. I've still got a sledge upstairs in the bedroom. A lovely sledge our Harry made. And we used to sledge down our field, and we would sledge with the Bell lads at Hill. and we would tie the two sledges together. And I remember on one occasion, we were coming down the bank and we must have got on a bit of a cant or something, and Harry was on the front guiding the sledge, and he says, "Get off, you buggers," he says, "we're going at Boone." And of course, one sledge ended up on the wall top, the other one ended up in the river. But I mean, we weren't hurt or anything.
Childhood was absolutely wonderful in Stanhope. The outside was our playground. We spent all of our hours out of the house. Most of our time was spent in Stanhope Dean, or it was spent on the quarry heaps up above Stanhope. And when we were playing on Stanhope heaps, we were usually cowboys or Indians, or we were playing war games with guns. Sometimes we had toy guns, sometimes we just used our hands, sometimes we used a twig for a gun, and it was wonderful. There were two big occasions in the autumn. One was bonfire night and the other one was Stanhope Fair. And at Stanhope Fair, all of the boys had what was called a pluffer. And a pluffer was a piece of wood or a piece of cane that was hollowed out to make a blowpipe. And we used to have fights, the top enders against the bottom enders. So these were big gangs of children who ran round all of the Stanhope Fair shows, the waltzer and the dodgems, and we had our pluffers and we used to fight each other with them. Sometimes we blew rice at people, sometimes we blew peas, hard peas through the pluffer, and sometimes it was something called cattaws, and they were the berries of a hawthorn tree, and why did they sting if they hit you in the face?
My uncle owned a row of cottages in Crawley site near Stanhope. Now when I say he owned a row of cottages, these were quite run down cottages, not posh country cottages like you see now. My uncle and his son both worked a bit of farming and in the fluorspar mines. The house that they lived in was very basic. It had flagstones on the floor, and in the kitchen there was only a cold water tap. There was no hot water. They were lucky actually to have a cold water tap. A lot of people just had a pump outside.
I was born in Crawley side in 1947, and I was actually born in one of those houses that Kate was talking about, Roy Log Cottages. And Kate must have lived in a posh house because our house didn't have water, and we had to walk up to the roadside tap and bring it back in a bucket.
And to go to the toilet, you had to go out of the front door, down the garden path, through the gate, down another path which was longer than the garden path, to a little stone building at the end. And that was the netty. That was the outside toilet. And it was always cold. And it nearly always had spiders in as well, which is even worse. And it had a wooden seat with a round hole in. And that's where you went to the toilet. Now, there was nothing to flush because it was what they called an earth closet. So everything went through the hole into the ground. And people used to put the ashes from their fire into the hole. And once a week, usually in the night, men from the council used to come and dig all the horrible stuff out and take it away. And that toilet had to do 3 houses, so 3 lots of families who were living in the row. And there was another little netty down at the bottom of another path for the other 3 houses.
My husband worked at Blackdean at the mine. He never worked underground, he always worked on the surface. And for several years before he retired, he drove the chase side. and filled the wagons when they came in to collect the spar and moved anything else that needed moving. He started work at the age of 14 at Settling Mine at Weirhead, at Cows Hill, and had been in the mining industry ever from that date.
But that's been down in the mine for over 100 years. And what did you say you thought it was?
Was it was the things like a drink bowl?
Yeah, it's a water bottle somebody's had. It's still got its cork in.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, underground it was not pleasant, as you can imagine. A little bit claustrophobic, if you like. Quite dirty. And of course the air wasn't good. But it was amazing the number of men who worked underground.
That's laying the foundation stone, October 1908. It took them about a year. Frostley, it's a very old place, part of the Bishop's Forest, the Bishop of Durham originally, but very much built around quarrymen. The quarrymen lived both in the village itself, but a lot on the hillsides. If you go out of the village, a little hamlet called White Kirkley, there is one big house, which once upon a time was six houses, full of quarrymen's families. There's a row of houses, also quarrymen's houses. In fact, there was that many living in it, although it's a small hamlet now. They had their own cricket team, their own kites team. Those places were built because of the quarrymen.
My father was a miner, he was a quarryman, as well as a farmer. You know, they had to find work to make a wage to keep the family going. Well, he worked at the quarry first down there, and that quarry wasn't ours. Ours was up here. He worked at that quarry there, and at 18-year-old, he was filling the crusher down there. And there was a lot worked at the quarry, about 50 odd, I think. And there was the boss was a big fella. What did they call? Herr Wharton. And he used to say to the lads, "Come by and I'll thrust them myself." That was when there was something heavy to lift.
Everything was done by hand, more or less. There was no machinery. In latter years, they had, like this picture here, they had drills, but everything was done by hammer. They had a lot of railway sidings, which they filled the trucks in the quarry. The trucks were then brought down to the main railway line at the station, emptied, and then the trucks would be taken back. And sometimes they physically had to push the trucks back. They could come down from the quarries all right, because it was a gradient down to the station, but taking them back was... sometimes they had little engines, but you know, on odd occasions they would push the trucks back themselves.
We used to take me dad his dinner from Lawless along the quarry when there was no shot firing going on. We would run across what we called the dead heap, just down there, and we'd run across the top of there, which was just a narrow path, and we would take me daddy's dinner. Oh, well, lovely memories down there, because there was a river and we used to play in the river and we would help with the haymaking. You know, it was really hard work, but we had to do it. We knew there was nothing else for us. Well, we used to rake the hay down the bank, rake the grass down the bank when it was hay, and my dad would lead it up with the horse and sledge. And of course, we would sit on the sledge. There was no health and safety in those days. They would bring the hay with the horse and sledge. Our Harry would fork to the bowl, and then I would fork up to my mother on top of the hay, and then it was all to tread down to level it so that you could get enough hay in the barn, and you'd be creeping underneath the eaves, you know, to stuff it in there. And I used to do the bacon and blacklead the firesides and polish the oilcloth. That was Friday morning job. Clean the steels on the oven and that. And we had a big fender, and we used to bake bread and tea cakes. And sometimes a pet lamb would come in the house and grab a handful of the dough and run outside with it.
Well, eventually I went to work at the auction mart at St John's Chapel. They had to be there by a certain time. The animals all had to be numbered, and there was a ballot drawn. And whichever number came out of the ballot was first through the ring. Nobody wanted to be first, but it happened. And it continued until everything was sold.
We never went to market, just Dad. We didn't like to see because they were pets to us children, and we didn't like them to, you know, be taken away.
I knew it was going to be made into bacon or something, but yeah, we weren't allowed. I think we went visiting somewhere else on that occasion. We were too young.
Well, they would separate the milk, and my dad would be turning the separator and be singing all the time, wag a leg, when woolta gan, a summer, when yows are all lamb, when the cows are all coved and the roads are all dry, I'll gan with me mammy to milk the kye. After we'd made the butter, we used to put it on a butter deal, which was a lump of wood on the table. And my mother would go like that with it, you know, to mix the salt in it. And then we would cut sheets of greaseproof paper and make blocks, make pound blocks. And my mother would put it in a basin. And then we had this lovely butter stamp with cows on and sheaves of corn, and used to put this lovely pattern on the top. And I used to love to make the butter because I would be eating it all the time. So how I ended up with brittle bones, I don't know.
Unfortunately, younger families have had to find work elsewhere, especially when the cement works closed. Quarrying dwindled out, lead mining dwindled out.
Those industries have gone now. There's still agriculture, but it doesn't employ the number of people as it did in those days, even, you know, that not that many years ago. A lot of people who live in the Dale now travel outside the Dale for work, and that brings other issues, such as a lot of the shops in the Dale have shut now. There's very few of the villages have their own shop because people are travelling to work. They can get their groceries and things in the big supermarket on the way home from work.
You know, there's such a lot of people come into the Dale. They do love it, the scenery. I mean, even in winter time, the scenery is beautiful. It is, honestly. But of course, for me, it's hard work. Getting the coal in. You know, the other winter, I was halfway up my thigh getting the coal in.
It's a lot busier, of course. There was very little traffic about when I used to come. And if you look at some of the photographs that we have of Stanhope Front Street, say in the 50s, 60s, there's hardly any cars at all. It's changed hugely now.
still home. It's still there. It's still here. Yeah. I know every inch of it.